Hi all, Dave here, and this video is all about breaking free from society's trap. So it's little surprise that most people become followers, resigned to accepting the status quo, even if that status quo morphs into a dystopian nightmare, rather than leaders trying to find purpose and lead the way. So from the moment that we're born into this world, society surreptitiously begins to wrap its threads of conformity around us, and years later the threads have turned into a thick rope, tying us to perceived norms and behaviours and outlooks and beliefs. And it's at this point that a person's character has been hijacked, either partially or fully, unable to properly show itself. It's also at this point that the individual in question is now completely vulnerable to those in power. So the individual has joined the indoctrinated herd. And few realise that this is happening to them, which is the interesting thing. Those that do realise what's going on then begin the confusing and painful and arduous process of removing the rope of conformity, thread by excruciating thread. The others remain in a state of ignorance, forever destined to remain roped to a set of expectations, living their life as prescribed by society. Now, there are two ways that society aims to control its citizens, and I would suggest that being aware of these is crucial in the quest for meaning and in the quest for truth, particularly right now at this absolutely critical juncture in all of our lives. So the first one is fear. Now, throughout history, the media and propaganda has been used to instill fear into populations, and even worse, it's been used to create a narrative which then becomes the accepted truth, again, which is where we are now. And once a society reaches this point, the descent into horror and into terror can begin. Again, where we are at this point right now. And this is playing out right now across social media with the poisonous and malignant spread of misinformation, and even worse, the censoring of critical and free thinkers. Now, for this reason, it is imperative to be independent-minded, curious and constantly open to changing our position on all topics. It's also absolutely crucial to subject ourselves to opinion which we tend to disagree with, because only in being open-minded to the information via the media and the information that we consume can we even stand a chance of reaching a conclusion that hasn't already been decided for us. And in adopting this position, we are far less prone to indoctrination. Now, the mass media exists primarily to control the population. It always has. And this is done via an ever-present and never-ending sense of threat, very few of which actually manifest into something tangible that actually does threaten people. So, as an example, the BBC News app on the day that I wrote this script featured 41 stories. Of these, 20 of the 41 had a definite negative angle and 17 were neutral, which leaves room for only 4 stories which have an upbeat message. So in the face of this, that's just one example, in the face of this, it comes as no surprise to me that many people live their lives in an omnipresent state of anxiety. And what's happening here, and across all of the other mass media outlets, whether broadcast or print, and across many social media channels as well, is a calculated strategy of manipulation and control via the dissemination of information. And the information used and published is chosen very carefully and selected for maximum impact. Now, the last 6 months has seen a relentless onslaught of negativity, the like of which we've never seen before in this country and in the West. Of negativity, death and destruction, which has had the effect of turning many people into frightened shells of their former selves, many terrified to leave the house or to socialise in public spaces. I think for some people, they're now more afraid of living than they are of dying. Very often as well, the negative news stories are connected in some way to the economy, because those in power realise that the economy is an important factor in many people's lives. So if they report alarming stories about a failing economy, individuals will be even more fearful of making changes to their situations. Expect to see more news stories related to a failing economy and the knock-on effect on people's lives in the next couple of months as summer turns to autumn and autumn turns to winter. But please just remember that when you watch the news, there is a cynical agenda being driven. That agenda wants to keep you scared, in line and submissive. I would suggest staying away from the mass media and consuming your information via smaller, less politically motivated agencies and individuals. And in this way, we all stand a greater chance of discerning something closer to the truth and discovering sources that we can trust. Now, it's important also to talk about distractions. We are in the 21st century, a massively distracted society. Now, the ability to choose is one of the most fundamental rights that a citizen possesses in a free society. And we were supremely lucky in that each of us had the ability to make our own choices each day. This expression of choice and free will has been reduced dramatically in the last few months. And we, as individuals, have allowed it to happen. Now, on a related note, the free market economy, which has exploded in the last 40 years, has enabled the rise of multi-billion-pound international companies, all of which are expert at tapping into an inherent human weakness present in all of us to a smaller or greater degree. And that is the propensity to sacrifice long-term satisfaction and personal development for short-term pleasure. Increasingly, over the last couple of decades, big business wants to keep us sedated, sedentary, and stupid. So we will continue to buy their products and increase their ever-expanding share of the market and increase their influence. These distractions are all around us all the time and are always available for us as we demand ever more comfort and convenience and pleasure, even in the midst of the biggest crisis to face humanity since the Second World War. Facebook, Netflix, smartphones, alcohol, gambling, and junk food are just some examples. And we can access all of these products with the swipe of a card or the click of a button, and all are bad for our health. Consider for a moment how easily controlled we are by these big corporations and how they exist to mold us into lazy versions of what we could be. Society becomes ever more enslaved to the puppet masters of the technology, food and drink, and entertainment sectors. All the time, people become more unhappy because instead of beginning the journey to find purpose and fulfillment, many turn to antidepressant drugs, and in doing so, stuff the pockets of drug companies. It's a vicious circle. Can you see the problem facing us? The really important debate to be having is to ask ourselves, all of us, to ask ourselves how we have all, to a greater or lesser degree, fallen hopelessly under the sinister spell of power-hungry corporations, and how we can break that spell. And this requires a candid conversation with ourselves about who we are and what we have become. We also need to examine our addiction to information. I recently noticed someone walking down the street completely absorbed in their mobile phone. This isn't exactly unusual, but then I looked closer and saw that about 1 in every 3 people was doing exactly the same. A few seconds later, I myself got my phone out of my pocket and started consuming information for no good reason whatsoever. And it suddenly struck me how the individual walking down the street, glued to their mobile phone, and this includes me, is the ultimate visual representation of our modern 21st century zombie society, sleepwalking through life, oblivious to the amazing things around us, but also numbed to the looming danger. A war of information is being waged on humanity. A war that serves to divide society, drive increasingly idiotic and lazy behaviour, and to control via a never-ending presence of fear. We really do need to wake up to this before it's too late.